Happy Friday and happy September, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Rocketeer Minute, where each and every day, Monday through Friday, we go over 1 minute of the greatest adventure movie Walt Disney's ever made, the 1991 Joe Johnston-directed feature, The Rocketeer. I'm one of your hosts, Jim O'Kane of TVDads.com.
And I'm Hal Bryan, an airplane nerd from the Experimental Aircraft Association here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And Jim, speaking of airplane nerds from the Experimental Aircraft Association here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, I brought reinforcements today. It's a real privilege to bring along a guest, somebody that I'm proud to consider a friend. And he has admitted, at least in private, that he considers me a friend as well. Please welcome Jack Pelton, who is chairman of the board at EAA and our chief executive officer. Jack, thanks so much for taking a few minutes to come and chat with us about the Rocketeer.
Well, Jim and Hal, it's great to be on the show. I've been following the podcast for quite some time, and you guys certainly have brought on a lot of very, very interesting guests, and I think have kind of brought the movie back to where it needs to be, which is out publicly again and getting the fan base around it. It's a great feature film. I really enjoy it.
Well, it really is a love letter to so many things, the period films, the old serials, and of course the vintage aviation, which is an interest you and I have had in common forever.
And it's certainly, when you watch it, it brings out that I don't want to say Walter Mitty, but that boy in us all that wishes we could fly. And when you see him put that Rocketeer on his back and put the helmet on, I think we all deep down have said, I really want to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and this is one of our best minutes for that, because you always wanted to fight with a giant on top of a Zeppelin.
Lothar's a pretty interesting guy. When you see him in the movie, I'm not sure how to react. You say, hello, Lothar, this is Jack, and shake his hand, or do you just run like crazy the other way because you're not sure what's going to happen?
Right. It's just a wall of a man.
Definitely a man on a mission. He really, there's so many things going on in his life, but he just, I have to restrain or stop the Rocketeer. And why not with a wrench? I think... Nobody ever reaches for like a large screwdriver or anything else. It's got to be a big open crescent wrench that looks like it's the thing that you screw the cockpit of the Zeppelin onto the bottom of. That's probably about the same width for the nuts that are holding it on.
Yeah, I was really surprised that it was a wrench, because I would have thought on his tool belt of things that he uses to assassinate people with, it would have been a can of WD-40. I thought that would have been more appropriate to spray them right there.
And then just sort of like bug spray.
Yeah.
Or you could do the old James Bond thing and hold the lighter in front of the aerosol can and make a little mini flamethrower out of it.
In watching that, though, I kept every second I'm thinking, this thing's got to blow up. We all know how the Hindenburg went, and right. Here they are dancing around on the top of the Zeppelin, thinking this is going to end really badly.
Well, we've joked a number of times across the show about I think it was Chekhov's old adage, if you show a gun in Act 1, it better go off in Act 3. And I think that's, we saw a Zeppelin and newsreel in Act 1, so here we are in Act 3. We all know what's going to happen. And Jim, and I think, no spoilers, but I think when that does happen, we're going to have a guest on who's going to talk a lot about how they did it.
Yeah, we'll have some pretty good behind the scenes. I was trying to think of Zeppelins that didn't blow up, and the only one I can think of is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade would be the only one where they didn't show a Zeppelin that blew up, but it was in the movie.
That one made it.
It's a stunner of a. This is a stunner of a set. We all have in our heads how big Zeppelins were in real life, and this seems to get the scale right. Just these gigantic gas bags floating in the skies. It's amazing to think about and see, let alone have a big fist fight.
Speaking of gas bags in the sky, today's kind of a memorable day, because it was just over 2 years ago that Hal and I had an opportunity to fly the Zeppelin.
That's right. It's a delightful, wholly appropriate segue.
Was that a great segue?
Yeah.
As soon as Jim said gas bags in the sky, I just thought, okay, somebody's got to mute Jack. Wow. Here it is. It's over the plate.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
How did it all come about?
Well, it's interesting because number one, Jack and I were joking yesterday about poor Jim, how we were going to have this conversation and say, well, 66% of the people on today's show have flown a Zeppelin. Nobody likes to rub it in.
Jim, and that's another reason for you to come to AirVenture in Oshkosh.
I think so. I'll keep.
I think we might have the Zeppelin there next year, and we could then make it a full 100% of our attendees today.
I'll bring my cable and wrench. We'll be all. I don't think I have a hat.
Exactly. You could run around on the top. Anyway, so, Goodyear has a long history, of course, of airships of all kinds, both Zeppelins, which would have been rigid airships with multiple sort of ballonets inside of hydrogen in this case, later helium, and if you call it a Zeppelin, that means that is a brand name. So Goodyear built Zeppelins, and then later sort of under license, and then later built blimps, which they're sort of more famous for. And a few years ago, they started retiring their traditional blimps, which are non-rigid. It's basically a big bag full of helium, and brought out the new Zeppelin NT that made in Germany, and what they call Wingfoot 1, and now they've since launched Wingfoot 2. So they were bringing that to Oshkosh to sort of inaugurate it, and it's actually, as I recall, Jack, it says the Zeppelin NTs are a semi-rigid. They've got a keel and then a few individual ballonets, if I remember right.
That's my understanding is how they're produced, and that's in Friedrichshafen, Germany, home of the Dornier Aircraft Company.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the classic home of airships, the Airship Museum is out there. High on my bucket list. I've spent a fair amount of time in Germany, but never made it out to Friedrichshafen. But anyway, one of them came to Oshkosh, and I was changing roles at EA at the time, going from the social media stuff to writing, bigger and more bloated, long-winded stories for the magazine outside of the 140 characters on Twitter. I got assigned to do a story about the airship, and I was extraordinarily lucky to be able to sort of write it in first person, because I've been in love with airships my whole life. I found a book that Goodyear had sent me when I was about 10 years old in response to a letter I'd sent them. So it was arranged that I would get a flight. Then I bumped into Jack around the office, and he gave me his classic sort of raised eyebrow. So I heard you're going for a ride on the Zeppelin. They sort of wandered off back down the hall, as is his wont. So we started talking, and I started negotiating with the people at Goodyear. How many seats do I have on this? And
you only have one, just to be clear.
Well, it's true. I only had one. Although, as I remember, Jack, when you and I showed up for the flight, you were talking to the Goodyear guy, and he just sort of shrugged and said, "Look, it's all up to Hal. This is his flight." So that was an extraordinary feeling of raw power. But anyway, we're rambling here a bit. But long story short, Jack was able to ride along. We took that flight together. Both of us got some time at the controls. Very, very different from the controls, of course, aboard this airship. It's all fly-by-wire. It's a side stick. The Wingfoot 1 cockpit looks more like an Airbus than just about anything else, with a tiny, tiny little side stick. And it is about, roughly speaking, maybe about a third of the length of the Luxembourg, the fictional Luxembourg, and Hindenburg and Graf Zeppelin.
Wow. When I was a kid, being a New Jersey boy, I went to Lakehurst, New Jersey, to hangar number 1, which is where all the big Zeppelins used to park for the Navy ships. The dirigibles used to park there, and although they're gone, they still have model airplane shows that go on inside the hangar. That's how big this hangar is. And
I have participated in a few of those.
Oh,
I was
really?
honest. Yeah, we had a supplier that was Bendix out in Eatontown, New Jersey, and on weekends when I was there on business, I would stay, and I like to fly indoor rubber-powered model airplanes, which that hangar is famous for endurance contests, flying those small airplanes.
The scale of it's impossible to. I mean, you can see pictures of it, but the scale of it when you're there, it's just your mind just tries to wrap itself around it, saying it's bigger than like a domed football stadium. The length of it, at least, that's how it was to me as a 10-year-old. I was like, this is the biggest building I think I've ever been in, and it's just the scale is something that you try to picture they had photos of dirigibles inside that took up the length of the hangar. So just it really impressed me about how much gas there was up floating in the sky. These things must have been like clouds at the time. Just they flew. I was astonished as a kid, and I'm still even looking at pictures of them today. It's an amazing way to travel.
In the story that I did about the Goodyear airship, I related a story my dad always told, and I won't belabor it here, but he was about 5 years old, and he saw the USS Macon fly over his home outside Los Angeles. And he said it was probably 500 to 800 feet above the ground. And, this was an airship that was roughly 1,000 feet long. And here's this little 5-year-old just sort of out playing on the sidewalk, and then hears this noise and sees this thing sort of come out of the fog. And just how amazed he was. And he was running door to door, just banging on like strangers' doors so that somebody else would come out and see this, just because he said, nobody will believe me if they saw what I saw, drifting overhead. And now, of course, it's come full circle for me because I get to walk through our museum, and we have a propeller from the Macon on display. It's even something you can actually touch. And it's strange for me to just touch this thing that so impressed my dad as a 5-year-old, 85 years ago.
But at least nobody was fighting on the roof like we're watching here. With,
now wait a minute. There was some controversy inside of the Zeppelin during this flight that we had. I had flown the Goodyear airship, and certainly there, as Hal mentioned, significantly different type of flying machine, kind of a more vectored thrust on the Zeppelin. But Hal and I were dueling over who was going to get the stick time first, and that got kind of ugly.
It did quite nearly come to blows.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness your lovely wife Rose was there to.
That's not a good thing,
because
Hal was her favorite friend. So I felt really as if I was the third wheel in this whole deal.
So the battle for who was the finest pilot, Zeppelin pilot of all of Oshkosh was on the line.
It was. Exactly. It got ugly, I'll tell you.
But at no point was anybody thrown out, as far as anyone knows. I mean, what happens out over Lake Winnebago,
As Rose likes to say, and no one got hurt.
How do they go up? I'm wondering, do you go in the pattern? Is there a pattern for blimps? Do they follow it like regular aircraft, or do they just kind of?
They do actually. At AirVenture, where we operate when the Zeppelin is there, and we operate it out of what's called Pioneer Field, which is a grass runway behind our museum. There's all the air show activities and crowds, and there's actually a defined pattern for how the Zeppelin will navigate. It's kind of a racetrack circular pattern, but it's incredible how nimble and precise it actually flies compared to the original airships that Goodyear used to put up in the air.
I guess a little more difficult to do touch and goes, though. I would think. I don't know if.
Actually, you'd be surprised. This thing can sort of motor right down. As Jack mentioned, it's got a degree of vectored thrust. It's got three engines driving 4 propellers, if I remember correctly. So there's 2 on the side that rotate sort of traditionally as you would expect, and then there's one at the tail that has a propeller that can do forward thrust, and something that's more like an anti-torque rotor or tail rotor on a helicopter for side to side. The people I feel sorry for is sort of the ground crew, because you used to need 50, 60 people in trucks and everything else, and just to get the thing sort of down and moored, and this thing can fly itself right down to the ground, set down on its wheel, keep the engines running, hold itself there while people get on and off, and then fly off away and go do it again. Yeah. It's incredibly maneuverable.
And actually, the end result in the 95th minute of the Rocketeer may have been different if it was in the modern Zeppelin, because this thing has enormous sightseeing windows in it. One of the features of the new Zeppelin is they had thought one of the markets they were going after was truly doing sightseeing tours. So you could put one up in San Francisco and do a city tour and see the Golden Gate Bridge and all the high rises and other things. Harrison Clare would have been able to have seen local.
That's true.
Come swinging towards the
probably use plexiglass windows too.
The new Zeppelin.
Yes, it would be a lot lighter.
Yeah,
and that's something that I'm not sure off the top of my head. And Jim, we have a mutual friend over at airships.net. We had talked early on about getting on for some of these segments, so we'll have to ask him about whether they would have used any actual glass in the German Zeppelins at the time. But it sure makes for a good effect when somebody goes smashing through it.
Yeah, plexiglass was around for a while. I mean, I think it was around in the 20s.
Right. And the British had their version Perspex
yes.
that they used on fighter cockpits and things like that.
Was duct tape around in the 20s?
That's a good question.
Let's ask the
I'll
internet.
talk slowly while Jim mutes his mic and looks us up. And in moments, Jim will act like we've all known all along. That's how we do it here on this show.
Funnily enough, there was a material called duct tape as early as 1902. What it was is an early, at least a printed version of it, was that 1902 steel cable supporting the Manhattan Bridge. were first covered in linseed oil, then wrapped in duct tape before being laid in place. So there was a type of duck fabric with a mucilage on it.
Again, if Lothar had duct tape, it may have turned out differently.
Yeah. Oh, duct tape and WD-40. I mean, the world could have been conquered easily. So
Thank goodness it didn't fall into the wrong hands.
Hal, any idea on the scrambled eggs hat that the captain's wearing? Is that a typical Nazi hat, or is that a typical Zeppelin
That looks to
pilot
me
hat?
like more like the sort of semi-civilian. And Jack, please chime in. You may know this better than me, but it does. I read about second 51 there. It does look like that is if it's not a proper sort of civilian Zeppelin captain's hat, it's certainly very credible. It's got that kind of sort of that German eagle around the wreath, and then there's the blue circle in the middle with the Zeppelin across it. I'll be honest with you, I would need to look that up to say for certain. But if it's not correct, it's very credible, and it would be in that these were sort of government operations, but it was an individual corporation. It was Zeppelin Luftschiffbau that would operate these as passenger liners and things. Not, of course, the fictional Luxembourg, but the real Hindenburg and Graf Zeppelin, and then very briefly the Graf Zeppelin II. So it would have been civilian, but have a kind of a paramilitary look.
I noticed he didn't have the Zeppelin wings that... Oh, did I mention, Hal, that I have a pair of Zeppelin wings?
Where'd you get those, Jim? Where'd you get those, Jack? Sorry. Jeez. I'm a little flustered.
I was going to say, Jim's got them too. Yeah, after the piloting of the Zeppelin and navigating so brilliantly around Lake Winnebago and AirVenture, with my friend Hal and my wife in the back, I was officially awarded by Hal a set of Zeppelin wings.
So I do have to give a quick shout to my friend Abby Manali, who runs a great business called Altered History. In fact, she'd be an interesting guest, so you never know. Maybe we'd reach out to her. She manufactures sort of patches and pins and insignia and things that are very much right in this era. There's sort of a little bit of a steampunk element to some of the stuff that she does. But she did this beautiful set of 25, a limited run of 25 sterling silver Zeppelin pilot wings. And, of course, as soon as they came out, I, being the kind and generous individual that I am, as soon as I heard about it, I immediately ordered a set for myself. And I have...
to test it out.
Yes, exactly. I have number 1 of 25. And I had those for a while. And then this crazy opportunity came along where Hal and Jack's excellent Zeppelin adventure. And so then I reached out to her and said, "Oh, please tell me you have one left." And I think she had 1 or 2 left. I can't remember, Jack, if yours were numbered 24 or 25. 23 other people out there have these, but ours are better because...
You've got the bookends, yes. You've got
Exactly.
the locomotive and the caboose, yeah. We'll have to get a picture of that to put on the site for today's episode. One thing I wanted to point out while we're looking at the interior of the Zeppelin, I remember also as a kid going to the National Air and Space Museum, and there's a beautiful display. Hopefully it's still there. I haven't been in there in a while, but they had a beautiful display on Zeppelins showing the engineering of getting rid of weight on the ship. And you can see in the background the struts, the trusses that are holding up the framework of the ship have many holes drilled into them.
Sure.
And not only that, but if you hold the material is aluminum and magnesium, which rather than the standard iron or very thin metal parts or even copper, they were so much lighter weight. There was an exhibit where they had an aluminum frame and a magnesium frame, and the magnesium frame was even lighter than the aluminum by about half, and you could lift both the trusses made out of the two different materials, and feeling the difference was just incredible. And then applying it to a ship that goes back to the horizon, the ability to get rid of that much weight was a fantastic achievement back then.
Well, there were so many things too. The Hindenburg had so many amenities, but it was this constant trade-off. Everything we found in aviation is always sort of a trade-off between sort of weight and performance and all those sorts of things. So there was a piano bar on the Hindenburg, and there was even a smoking lounge, which seems like a just dreadfully bad idea in retrospect. But there was a piano bar on the Hindenburg, and they had a special custom-built aluminum grand piano. So it was, we couldn't not travel across the Atlantic, or couldn't travel across the Atlantic without live music, because we're not barbarians, but we have to make the piano pretty light. But Jack, you've had an amazing career in aviation with Douglas and Dornier, and of course CEO at Cessna before coming to EAA. So you're no stranger to leading teams that try to solve these challenges in terms of performance and all these different trade-offs.
Yeah, the probably the biggest dilemma you have in any new development program is making sure that the weight does not grow or increase over what your predicted weight metrics were. And I can't think of a single program where they halfway into the development they're already into a weight reduction program. And thinking of an airship and how critical the weight would be, that had to be a phenomenal design challenge to get every possible ounce out of there to ensure that it would perform properly.
I can remember working for British Aerospace. There was an upgrade for the BAE 146 as it was turning into the RJ70. A lot of the sales were done in South America, where they didn't have things like jetways and stuff, and they wanted to put an onboard ladder to stairway to come out, and the stairway that they wound up building was so light you could actually pick it up yourself. This was it was a full size ladder, but you could carry it in one hand. It was so lightweight and kind of scary because the strut work and things were so thin. You thought, oh, this is going to split when somebody steps on it, but it could hold, I think it was something like 350 pounds for individual stairways could hold 350 pounds easily. And that was my introduction to figuring out weight reduction. But that, like you were saying, Jack, it goes through every system, that everybody wants just a little, a couple of ounces off of this button or that, that chair.
Wasn't the BA 146 probably one of the greatest three-engine airplanes? The story they always told was that all four never worked at the same time, so you always had at least three on approach.
Yes, we've heard that. Yeah, we had one of the stories that I heard about trying to sell it to American Airlines was Robert Crandall was at a meeting, and famous Robert Crandall did not have his kindness and politeness with salespeople.
Oh, I have a great Robert Crandall story for you.
Oh, okay. Well, let me tell this one. He was looking at the 146, and they had all the sales guys there showing it, and he goes, "Let me give you 4 reasons why we're never going to buy a 146." And he just pointed at the models, and and that was the end of that sales meeting.
My boss, the program manager of the MD-80 program, which we had sold an enormous number of MD-80s to American Airlines, which really kind of solidified the program, was having terrible dispatch reliability problems. So he said, you've got to come with me and help convince Mr. Crandall that we've got all of these things in place that are going to solve all of these issues. And so we're in his office, and I'm going through this brief, and he's going through the data, and he always had these reader glasses that he would wear on the end of his nose. And he takes this glass off, and he throws it at me across the desk, and it misses. And there's a lot of profanity going on, and he's yelling and screaming, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is awful. My career's over with. I'm done. My boss is in there, watching all this. And as we leave, I'm kind of shaking my head, and Crandall's secretary says, "Oh, don't worry." In his lower right-hand drawer, he has about 50 pairs of those that he throws usually on a daily basis at people. And then later, things got significantly better over time, and he invited me to this employee recognition dinner that he had in kind of a similar, typical Crandall fashion. Back then, we were finally moving into the era of no smoking in the offices or buildings, and we're at this dinner table in a big convention area, and he smoked incredible number of cigarettes in. And so, and so he's got this little private ashtray under there, and this is a no smoking event of which he's smoking like crazy, and his assistant is making sure the ashtray gets emptied frequently. I thought, wow, this is a whole different era.
I can't even remember the last time I got called into your office and you screamed profanity and threw things at me, Jack. It's been months.
Can't wait to see you Monday.
Well then, I'll bring a box.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'll have my file ready as always.
No, we have to go to that other building where your file is kept, because it takes the entire building to house your file.
Yes, the Hal Bryan Human Resources wing.
Yes. and a bigger box for the tchotchkes, I could imagine. I would think.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah. The tchotchkes are... Whew.
Yes, all the little Rocketeers and toy cars and Star Wars figures and stuff around my desk, because I'm a professional. All right, that's how you know.
Although you haven't added anything new of recent, so it's been kind of quiet recently.
I think you need to find a Lothar action figure on a rope, or just swinging that like a pendulum.
I've got the little inflatable Goodyear Wingfoot 1 that hangs over my hangs from the ceiling over my desk. I should get a little tiny Lothar that can fall off the top and swing around.
I need a full size Lothar next to my door. Wouldn't that be a great intimidating? Yeah. You really want to come see him? You have to first get through Lothar, and have the wrench in his hand, of course.
Of course. Yeah. Well, we know the guy who has the prosthetics that were used in the film. And
really?
Those are mask and prosthetics are still exist, if you can believe that. He's got those on display at home. So
one of the greatest things about this this podcast is that I thought that I was obsessing on the Rocketeer. I thought I was just obsessed, and Hal first proved me wrong, and then we've met so many other people who were just pikers and amateurs when it comes to collecting and obsessing about this great movie.
And I find it fascinating that there hasn't been, I don't want to say a sequel, but something themed similarly, which has the innovation and wanderlust of a different form of flying, yet also has all those beautiful airplanes that are in Rocketeer. That's what I found so kind of romantic about the movie. It had the vintage history, but also that dream of where's this all going to go. And you think with space and going to Mars and all the other things that somebody would come out with some other new exciting movie like The Rocketeer. Yeah,
I guess the closest we came to it was Joe Johnston's other movie, the Captain America movie with that giant flying wing, which was just fascinating. But they didn't spend enough time in it. They should have had more things going. Just the idea of having bombs labeled Chicago and New York and stuff, and it just seemed like that they could have gone further with that. But it was, I guess, just a taste of what could have been with if they had ever done Rocketeer 2 and Rocketeer 3.
And of course, as we've talked about many times on the show, there's at the time we're recording this, there's a project out there called The Rocketeers, which would be a sequel of sorts, set, I think, in late World War II. And we don't know much about it beyond that. So far as we know, again, at this point, Danny Bilson, the screenwriter of one of the two screenwriters of the original film, is not involved, although he's heard that Max Winkler, Henry Winkler's son, is maybe attached to it. And our dear friend Billy has not yet been approached for his Luke Skywalker style mentor role, but he's promised to tell us if he is. So who knows?
Hopefully we'll hear about that in the next in the next 20 episodes, because we are running. I can't get over how fast this thing is going. It's just I was looking the other day at a spreadsheet of all of our episodes, and it's just only a tiny march of days left before we have to say goodbye to the Rocketeer.
We're here on September 1st, and our last episode is slated to come out September 21st. So we're in the
what's next?
Slide.
3 weeks to go, and
I guess I might go and start focusing on work again, but otherwise. I don't know.
That's an interesting concept. Work.
Yes. Some kind of, Monday through Friday productivity. But
Hal, you don't need to get crazy.
Yeah, that's true. Why start now?
But how did you guys find out that there was some sort of something in the works, as you put it, Hal? Where do you get this information? I find that fascinating.
Nerd blogs, I guess, would be the simplest way to do it. Sort of rumors.
I think there was a Hollywood Reporter, I think, was the one that mentioned it, and then it was just indistinct enough that when you read the article, all these people were attached to it, and nobody was talking, and they didn't really have any other details other than a press release. So it's frustrating, especially when you want to see something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. But it has been interesting because the character and it just sort of refuses to go away. It's one of these things that, Star Wars had a long period with sort of no central film activity, but there was a lot of ancillary stuff and things that kept it going. And so you've got The Rocketeer, which is a movie that is sort of orders of magnitude smaller, but it's been out there 25 years. But there's been a fairly maybe not steady, but there's been lots of periods with different merchandise that still comes out, continuing stories in comics. There's a big book of short stories written, so not graphic novel, but prose short stories. So people still keep the character alive, and then of course collectors like Mike Bruno and great costumers and builders like Jamie Hicks, artists like Adam Hicks out there that are all continuing to sort of keep the image of this thing alive. So it could just be my eternal optimism, but it just seems inevitable that we'll see more stuff. We'll come back to it somehow. And certainly, Jim, everybody we have talked to on the show that had any involvement with it, from extras to writers to aerial coordinator and of course the star himself, everybody looks back on this movie with affection. Everybody loves this thing and is proud of it, as they should be.
Yeah, it is a deep love for the character. I mean, I don't think we've talked to anybody who said I had a miserable time. Well, we've heard that Joe Johnston may have had a miserable time, but I still think he enjoyed the characters and working with the creator Dave Stevens. So I hopefully someday, somewhere in the future, maybe long after this podcast is done, there'll be a new generation of Rocketeers out there. I look forward to that movie, whatever it may be. Hopefully,
and Jack
it'll be
will
a good
work
one.
on getting it to AirVenture on our big outdoor screen, and you and I can go up and introduce it.
That would be really, really fun. And what about also having somebody in a parachuting wing suit with a rocket on their back?
There you go.
Or we could get our friends at Jetpack to come out.
Oh, sure.
Stefano would.
He'd come fly in his real jetpack. That's they're up to I think 9 or even almost 10-minute flight times now, which seems short, but that is absolutely staggering when you consider we've been at that 30-second-ish mark for 40 plus years, 50 years even.
Yeah, he said that they really don't want to go more than 3 minutes because people get bored, which I think both of us were just completely staggered by the idea that somebody could get bored watching a man in the sky flying.
What's the propellant?
What kind of a dystopian future is this? What's that, Jack?
The propellant that they use in Stefano's jetpack?
So they're actually using it's a true jetpack. He's actually using some of these smaller turbine engines. So it's not like the old hydrogen peroxide rocket belts that people like Bill Suter and stuff were flying.
It's just regular Jet A, I think, isn't it?
And mentioning Bill Suter, the famous Bell rocket pilot, we've actually talked to him a few times offline, and he was interested in maybe joining us on the show, but we're never able to work that out. But it was a real kick to talk to him. He is a colorful character.
Anybody can strap one of these things on. You have to. I think you by default you are colorful. It was quite an amazing thing to do it back then. It's, still stunning to watch the videos and stuff of it. Jack, thank you again so much for being on our show. It really is, as Hal was saying, it's an honor and a privilege, and I know he gets to see you every day, but I appreciate being able to meet you, and hopefully I'll get to see you face to face up in Oshkosh, and we can look at planes together.
Well, you have. I mean, I want to hear the commitment. You are definitely coming to Oshkosh because Jim,
I have to.
I think you will. We can't talk about what it's really like and do it justice. You have to be there to experience it. It's just overwhelming, and it's sensory overload when you're there for the week. And
I want to talk to you about some more airplane sales war stories because I was a dozen years with British Aerospace, and there are many.
Yes, there are.
Plus, Jim, I know a guy who can probably help you out with a wristband and get you in. So,
oh, cool. Okay, I'm so there.
Excellent.
Wow. Well, great. Well, for folks who'd like to join us on our conversations here, we are always available out there on the social media. We're out there on the Twitter. You can find us at Rocketeer Minute. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Rocketeer Minute. Find us on the great big website, rocketeerminute.com, where you can catch up on all the previous episodes, get some cool swag from Amazon, and leave us messages about how well we're doing. Join us here next week. Take the weekend off or catch up on previous episodes that you may have missed. And we'll pick it up Monday as we get into the final round of fighting Lothar and and steering Zeppelins around here on the Rocketeer Minute. So until next time, over and out.
Go get him, kid.